the thing off the table.
Oh yeah, that's so simple.
In front of the person?
Yes.
He was such a
He just loves the
So then the person left. The person left for a while, and then went back a couple months later, and sat down. And the manager came over and said, "We need to talk about your Splenda use." So, all right. So this is the story that this student wrote about. Now let's talk about.
Wait, in their journal?
Yeah. Right. So let's talk about this from a communication theory perspective. Now what?
In the O to 4 circle, that's all we want.
He's in the 10 Splenda circle. All right, so here's the incident. We'll call it the Splenda incident. Splenda. There we go. The Splenda incident. Now, think with me about what kind of theories of communication would help describe and explain what's going on here. What kind of things? You look at your list there and think about what makes sense. There could be 3 or 4 that might help us think about this.
Did he shoot him a semiotic?
Okay, yeah. So actually, the student did it on a semiotic basis. They did it. So we'll go more into this. All right. So semiotics is going to say something because you've got things that mean something.
I think our standpoint theory can actually relate.
Okay. So we've also got. So what are the different standpoints that are operating?
I guess he thinks it's okay. I paid for my coffee, I can get my sugar.
There's the customer standpoint, and then there's a manager standpoint. So you've got C standpoint and C1 and manager 1. Okay. So you got customer and manager standpoint.
Expectancy violations.
Okay. So expectancy violations theory. I don't think we did this. Did you look at it in some other course or something?
Oh no, I just look like it.
Well, it does. So what it says is that there are certain unspoken expectations that go on, and you can choose. There are consequences to violating them, and you can. This theory explains when a violation of a norm can have a positive effect. That there are certain conditions under which a violation of a norm will have a positive effect, and certain which will not. So yeah, so that could give us some thoughts about the way norms and expectations develop. And in this case, the violation of the norm, the manager had a norm like, well, you're allowed 1 or 2 of these. And if you violate it, it sets off some communication events. Right, so that would be...
I see the rhetoric in there also a little bit, with the eat those potatoes and, I mean, it's kind of far out, but it's there.
Well, when the manager came over and said, we need to have a conversation about your Splenda use, that's an attempt at persuasion. That's a persuasion event. Now, there's also nonverbal in here. I mean, we haven't done a lot of nonverbal. That is kind of semiotic. But staring, walking by, making faces, all of these. This is true. I don't make these things up. So, all right, so nonverbal.
Because Splenda costs a lot, that's why we was doing that.
It does not.
Well, Lisa doesn't think it does.
It costs more than equal and that other stuff, the pink stuff.
She'll tell us next week.
I'm going to tell you, and I'm
All right.
going to tell you exactly how much it costs per packet.
Okay, thank you. All right, now,
Let's hear it. Do you know?
So stupid.
Do you know it?
It comes, I don't know exactly, it's probably like $23 for a box of 5,000 packets.
Of Splenda?
And they're probably between Splenda and Equal and Sweet and Low and regular sugar in packets, there's probably maybe $1 between the two of how much one
Right.
costs from another.
but it doesn't, see, we human beings assign symbolic meaning to objects. And we treat things on the basis of the meanings we give them. Anybody remember what theory that came out of?
Coordinated management of meaning?
Okay, that could be a CMM, that we assign value. It also comes out of Mead, symbolic interactionism. Remember when we talked about sunglasses or things that become precious to you? So it's not just a sunglass, and it's not just a Splenda packet. It's
much more
something else. Yes, it's much more than that to some people. So you've got Meade symbolic interactionism. Now, what the challenge is for you to do in your reflections is not just to identify that, oh, well, there's a little bit of semiotics, a little bit of rhetoric here, a little bit of... It's to take one of them then and push it further and say, all right, what are the things and how can I use that theory to open up this experience? What's happening in this experience? Okay. And there could also be a little bit here of organizational control. Remember we did the theory about management, makes things work for the good of management, not the good of the worker. And so that was Dietz on organizational management communication. All right, now this student chose to do this in a semiotic analysis. So what words are going to show up in your, you can go in your book. I mean, we've got our books here and you can use them. Semiotics is chapter 25. And so what kind of language are we going to be using to talk about this event? What are words that are part of a semiotic analysis of something?
Signify.
All right, so we're going to talk about signs, signifiers, signified.
Connotations?
What's that?
Connotation?
All right, is that in here under this? Let's see.
I don't know.
Yeah. Relationship of these we're going to talk about is arbitrary. So the relationship is arbitrary between a signifier and a signified. It is structured by society or by individuals. Now, mostly, I will tell you this, mostly when we talk about semiotics, we're talking about socially connected signifiers and signifieds from a large, national level. This coffee shop is more of a little local thing. So if I were really working this case hard, I would push it more into Meade's symbolic interactionism, because that deals more on the individual level with what signs mean to us. But this was a good analysis that he did here. And but I would say that somewhere, if I were writing this, I would say, I'm going to use semiotics. Now I realize that that's mostly big settings, and that this is a small individual connection between the relationship between the signifier and signified. And also it says here a sign is part of a interrelated system. So this is where most people don't carry their reflections through enough. You get the idea, you say, there's semiotics here, there's a symbol and it signifies something. To really make it, fuller, you need to go after all of this language that is part of the analysis. I mean, the language asks you to look for things. That's the value of it. It says, well, did you find this? Did you find that? Did you find this? Look for it. Look for it. See if it's in there. And it helps you to do analysis of it. So you look for systems. You look for chains of signifiers, where one symbol meant something, and then the symbol itself comes to mean something else, and then the symbol comes to mean something else. And you have a chain of signifiers, where if you can trace back, and you trace back how it came to mean what it's meaning in this particular case. right, so let's try to get at this. Okay, you're right, Laura. Denotation and connotation are part of this too. So if I were going to look for a reflection or a weekly reflection that was a 3, 3 out of 3, I would have, all of these things would fit into it somewhere. They would be woven into the analysis of this event in the coffee shop and the Splenda packets. Which seems silly, but things have a lot of meaning. You won't, years ago when they were doing Vietnam peace talks, they couldn't get the peace talks started because no one could agree on the shape of the table that would be in the room where they were going to have the peace talks. They couldn't agree because if it were, if it were this kind of a table, then it would be a head of the table, and we couldn't allow that to happen. So then they talked about an oval table, but then we're still kind of a head to it. Then they took a round table, but then they didn't like that because people would sit across from it. And so if you look, most peace conference things end up with the people sitting like this and some mediators sitting over here. But they couldn't even start the peace talks because they couldn't agree on the table that they were going to sit around. So denotatively, a table is a thing you put papers on. Connotatively, it's a point around which power is exercised. And there are places of more power and less power. So signifier and signified come into play. All right, so talk to me about the Splenda packets. What's happening here in the language of semiotic analysis?
Okay, so this actual Splenda packets are denotation because there's sugar, and then the connotation is that they're towards the customer, it's there for their use and they use as much as they can, and to the manager, it's money going out the window. Okay,
so it's I paid for my coffee. The Splenda is part of my paying for the coffee, right? So it's for me is the denotation. It's overhead. I'm losing my money. So when I have to do my report at the end of the month, my numbers look worse because this guy comes in every day and uses 10 packets, and that's 3, how many? 30 times 10 is 300 packets a month. That's almost a whole small box full of them, so I'm losing $25 or whatever on this person. So that's kind of a standpoint theory. So you could mention this is sort of standpoint theory, but from semiotics, it's a connotation. There's connotative meaning to these things. So the signifier is the Splenda packet, and what is it signify? What is signified by it?
Enjoyment.
Okay, the one person is happy it's there. I like it, I want to use it. So to the one person it signifies service from the group. To the other person,
Like, I don't want to say tradition, but like something, like a daily routine, something that he does all the
all right.
time.
So there's a ritual aspect to this. All right, now here's a
Guide to loss of money.
Yeah, here's a good example, though. What set of theories deal with where we reproduce patterns by actions that have social meaning to us? Those are, we didn't do a lot of these, but it's a cultural theory. It's like speech codes almost. It's cultural studies where we produce and reproduce patterns that become comfort for us. There's also an edge of systems theory, homeostasis in here you could explore about normalized patterns. But we're going to stay away from that. See, that's a good point. we're not going to go down that road because we're trying to stay on the semiotics road. We don't want to go down the culture road, and we don't want to go down the standpoint theory road, because that would take a whole other set of language. So we're going to stay in the semiotics analysis. Okay? Yeah, so this represents, to some extent, this signifies a manager's own power. That's what this student came to say. That what these Splenda packets symbolize for the manager is my ability to control my world. So you're intruding in my ability to shape my world. Is this your boss, Lauren?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's very typical.
Okay. So the signifier of the packet, this thing that is signified, is my authority. And so if you touch the Splenda packet, you're in my authority area. And so this explains what's happening here. It makes sense now out of this, because when you first hear the story, you're like, that's crazy. And it's still crazy maybe, but at least you can explain it to somebody, what's going on, through system, that there are all different materials that are part, there are cups, there are, pink packets and blue packets and all of these things. And all of these are an interrelated system within the coffee shop. There are napkins and all that stuff. Right? And so they come to hold meaning. The chain of signifier probably goes from the Splenda packet to money to the monthly report to the manager's job. My job is dependent on putting in a good report, which means my bottom line looks really good, which means I control the amount of Splenda going out.
How would that affect that? It doesn't make sense to me. I think he's crazy.
You have to pay for it. Someone has to pay for this.
Then don't put the order in. Is that serious? Okay, we don't have Splenda today. Like,
Right.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Well, but this is a chain of signifiers that make sense out of this symbol. What's going on with this symbol?
So what is the sign? If the Splenda is
The sign is the whole thing together.
so it's the composite of the Splenda and all the various
Meanings that go with it, right. Becomes the sign. The sign is the combination of the signifier and the signified. Yeah. Right.
So there can be any number of signs,
Yes.
depending on what it's...
Right, and the coordinated management of meaning is nice here because it says what's happening to us is that we're working on the basis of different signs. These have different meanings. So I'm thinking I'm a customer, I'm paying. You're thinking I'm a manager, I'm paying. And so we're not coordinating our work of creating a social world from CMM perspective. But what I wanted to get at was this student, in this case, did a nice job of including most all of this in their analysis. This was a very complete, very full kind of look at a communication incident that could be interpreted from a theoretical perspective.
For the exam, will you be giving us, will we ever have an example that we have to dissect like
I can't, I don't remember right now. I don't think so. I may ask you about your project and your papers. I won't ask you anything outside of that. A big part of the exam will be matching up these theories with some of the names, with some statements that would be typical of the theories. So you're going to have to be able to connect the lines, between them.
Can I just ask a question about this
Yeah.
theory as it relates to, like I recently took a stab at something that was like a whole range of signs and signifiers all,
Right.
woven together, where a signifier becomes a sign and a sign becomes another signifier, and
Right.
it sort of all cascades and...
The chain, right?
Right, so how would you be able to apply, like, all of the elements of this theory when everything is so, has double meanings, triple meanings, it's not, when they're not clear.
Well, what any theory enables you to do is begin to analyze, analysis, which means to take apart and break down into individual parts. So like when you dissect an animal, you're doing analysis. You're taking the heart and the liver and the lung, and then you cut that open and you look at this and this. So all of this enables you to look really carefully and to take things apart. Now, the question of what you can do with that in the end, semiotics does not have a lot of normative power to it. It doesn't say, all right, now do this. I mean, there are theories that say, okay, now that you've done the analysis, here's what you do. Like critical theories say, make your workplace more democratic. Or CMM says, learn how to talk in meta communication. Semiotics is more analytic and less normative in telling you what to do.
So really, almost any interpretation is relevant as long as the pieces fit together.
As long as they make sense and are defensible.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
It could be any possible number of
Yeah, it could be.
interpretations.
Yeah. So, I mean, in your book, in Griffin's book, he's got the interpretation of a bologna sandwich. I don't know if you remember that or not. But he goes through this whole interpretation of bologna sandwich. You look at the bread, it's white bread, it's not dark bread, it's got lettuce in it. And everything, from a semiotic perspective, everything carries meaning to it and can make you interpret something. So you become a careful I mean, forensic scientists, if any of you are criminology majors or justice majors, forensics is all about this. You see a thing, what does it mean? There's just soil here. Well, what is the meaning of that soil? How did it get there? Where did it come from? What's its source? What does it signify in this case? So forensic science is kind of semiotic. Right, but a critical theorist would say, well, big deal, so what? You took it apart. That's nice, that was fun. Now what do you do with it? But for this person, in their case, it helped them to realize that if I want to make peace with this manager, I have to begin to see what it means to them. So that was a nice outcome for that case. So that was a good case. All right, any thoughts or questions about that? All right, how about we break for 10 minutes, which means 10 minutes, and then we'll be back. We'll do another couple of them, answer some questions, and then we'll be done.